Good evening and welcome to this mock interview with Dedra Strickland's Liberty University Professional Opportunities. Today I have the honor of interviewing Dedra as she discusses the development of emerging therapeutic framework, history centered healing, a model that integrates historical narratives, cultural memory, and clinical practices. Dedra is the founder of Precious Legacy LLC, a history rooted healing practice grounded in community care, ancestral awareness, and culturally responsive counseling. She is completing her master's in mental health counseling and continuing doctoral studies in care and community, where her research focuses on the intersection of historical trauma, identity formation, and narrative based healing. Her work draws from her lived experience, her training as a certified peer counselor and SUDP professional, and her deep commitment to honoring the stories that shape individual families and communities. Through his history centered healing, she explains how history functions not only as a context, but as medicine, an active tool for restoration, reconnection, and resilience. So today's conversation will explore the origins of her framework and clinical applications and visions she holds for its future. Dedra, thank you for being here. So let's begin.
Thank you for inviting me.
How did history centered healing emerge?
Well, I grew up in a storytelling culture where healing happened through memory, truth telling, and community. Also, academic training revealed gaps in traditional counseling models for clients carrying cultural and historical wounds. And naturally, I integrated history and narrative into sessions. Clients responded deeply. Genealogical research as well, especially into my own lineage, which is the Harkins Choctaw line, showed me how resilience and rupture shape identity. Also, I recognized that trauma is emotional, historical, cultural, and communal. And the framework emerged from the intersection of lived experience, clinical training, and ancestral memory. And my core belief is that history isn't a burden, it's medicine.
How do you define history centered healing?
History centered healing is a therapeutic model that uses personal, cultural, and ancestral history as an active healing tool. It integrates narrative across generations, not just present symptoms. It uses a historical trauma lens to explain generational patterns. Also, it's strength based. It highlights resilience and ancestral wisdom. It understands healing as communal and relational, as well as treats history as a source of insight, identity, and restoration.
What problems does this model solve?
It helps clients recognize inherited wounds and generational patterns. It normalizes the impact of historical trauma on present behavior. It uses a historical lenses to contextualize migration,
Mhm.
racism, displacement, and rupture, as well as it identifies ancestral survival strategies and resilience. It connects past to present to explain beliefs, coping, and relationships. It integrates cultural practices, music, storytelling, ritual as therapeutic tools. It reframes shame based narratives into dignity based narratives. It empowers clients with language, context, and validation.
Mhm.
It grounds the work in trauma informed care through motivational interviewing, cognitive behavior therapy, and substance use dependency professional practices. And last, it honors culture and community as essential to healing.
So, what are the core principles of the model?
Core principles are historical truth telling, identity repair, narrative restoration,
Mhm.
ancestral connection, moral injury repair, community and belonging, cultural grounding, strength based lineage, and finally, integration and alignment with values and purpose.
And how do you apply this clinically?
I begin with the client's story. not symptoms. I map generational themes such as loss, resilience, silence, migration. I use narrative prompts to explore identity and coping. I connect historical experiences to present emotions and behaviors. I integrate cultural artifacts such as music, photos, documents, vinyl. I normalize historical trauma as an patterns, inherited patterns, excuse me. I highlight resilience and ancestral strengths. I co-create empowered narratives. I integrate CBT, MI, trauma-informed case, and SUDP practices. Again, CBT stands for cognitive behavior therapy. MI stands for motivational interviewing, trauma informed care, and then the SUDP stands for substance use dependency professional practices.
What makes your intake process different?
Well, story. My approach is story first, which begins with family history, culture, and narratives. I explore generational patterns and cultural identity, as well as I screen for historical trauma and inherited wounds. I identify lineage strengths and survival strategies, and I use artifacts to anchor memory and emotion. I assess community belonging and cultural support. I complete clinical assessments through a culturally grounded lenses. And finally, I create a holistic picture of the client's history and identity.
Given all of what you stated above, how do you explore generational patterns?
I map migrations. I map resilience, silence, rupture, and traditions. I explore cultural identity and community belonging. I screen for historical trauma and cultural dislocation. I identify ancestral strengths and coping strategies. I use artifacts to activate memory and grounding. I integrate community context and support systems. I maintain clinical grounding and ethical assessment. And last, I build a holistic understanding of the client's inherited story.
Now, how is this different from traditional intakes?
I shift from what's wrong to what happened. I begin with the story, not symptoms, and I map generational themes and cultural identity. I screen for historical trauma. I identify ancestral strengths. I use cultural artifacts as therapeutic tools. I include community and belonging as core elements. Finally, I maintain full clinical assessment through a cultural lenses. I create a holistic, identity-centered picture of the client.
And how do you address historical trauma?
I name inherited trauma and normalize generational patterns. And finally, I use a historical lens to contextualize present struggles. And I center cultural identity and belonging. I highlight ancestral resilience and survival strategies, integrate cultural practices such as music, ritual, and storytelling, reframe internalized narratives into dignity based ones. I connect past experiences to present coping and relationships. Ground the work in trauma informed care,
Mhm.
CBT, MI, and SUDP. And finally, I emphasize communal healing. I want to say that cognitive behavior therapy is a structural short term psychotherapy that teaches our clients how to identify and challenging them on
Mhm.
negative thinking patterns.
Mhm. Excellent.
Yeah, I wanted to emphasize that in the interview so that the
Mhm.
audience know the meaning of CBT.
Excellent. Why use Black music and vinyl in therapy?
Music opens emotional pathways, and pathways talk therapy cannot reach. Vinyl creates ritual presence and embodiment. It affirms cultural identity and belonging. It activates personal and um, ancestral stories, and regulates emotion and soothes the nervous system. Bridges generations and strengthens identity. Helps to reconstruct fragmented identity. It grounds the space in cultural resonance and highlights resilience and cultural brilliance.
As we close this conversation, it becomes clear that history centered healing is not simply another therapeutic model. It is a profound restoration of something our communities have always known, that healing is historical, cultural, communal, and deeply human. What Dedra Strickland has created is a framework that speaks directly to the lived realities of marginalized communities, especially those whose histories include enslavement and displacement, colonization, migration, and cultural rupture. This model does what traditional Western approaches have rarely attempted, and it treats history itself as a clinical intervention and a source of identity and a pathway to repair. History centered healing gives language to wounds that were inherited, not chosen. It validates the emotional weight carried by families whose stories were silenced or distorted. And it reframes those stories through the lens of resilience, brilliance, and ancestral strength, offering a way forward that is both clinically grounded and culturally rooted. What makes this model extraordinary is its global relevance. Around the world, communities are grappling with the legacies of historical trauma, from indigenous nations to African diasporic communities, from refugees to survivors of war, from families fractured by migration to those navigating the aftershocks of systemic oppression. History centered healing offers a framework that honors each community's unique story while providing universal tools for truth telling, identity repair, and collective restoration. This work is not just innovative, it is necessary. It fills a gap in the mental health field by bridging genealogy, culture, trauma theory, narrative practice, and community care into one coherent, dignifying approach. It reminds us that healing is not an individual act, it is a communal inheritance. And it affirms that when people reconnect with their lineage, their culture, and their history, they reclaim not only their story, they reclaim their power. History centered healing is more than a model, it is a movement, a restoration, a return to ourselves, and its impact will reach far beyond the counseling room into families, communities, and generations to come. Thank you, Ms. Strickland.
Thank you for having me.